All right, Algebra 1, we are talking about the last two things of our Chapter 5. We took our test, but there's two things from Chapter 5 that we need to discuss still. And if you don't have this printed out at home, that's okay. All you really need to do on your own piece of paper is write down anything that is highlighted. Okay, so I'll highlight anything you need to write down, and that's important enough for you to get in your notes. And then from there, you can go ahead and have your own notes in that way, okay? So for parallel lines, a couple definitions, okay? So the first one, parallel lines are two lines that never intersect, okay? Or in other words, they have the same slope. Okay, so I'm going to go same slope. Okay, so two lines that never intersect, or in other words, they have the same slope. So you can kind of see that in the picture here. Those are parallel lines. Okay, so in the same way, perpendicular lines are the same way, but the opposite. So two lines that intersect, at a right angle, which we'll talk more about angles in geometry, but a right angle is one of those ones that makes kind of a 90-degree angle like this. Okay, so two lines that make a right angle. Okay, so that's highlighted as well. And they have the opposite reciprocal slope, or negative reciprocal slope. You'll see it kind of both ways. So for parallel, it's the same slope. For perpendicular, it's the exact opposite slope. Okay, so what are negative reciprocals, or what are opposite reciprocals that I'm talking about? Okay, so to find the reciprocal, or the perpendicular slope, you need to do two things. You have to switch and flip. Okay, switch the sign, like plus or minus, and flip the fraction. Okay, so I always say flip, switch and flip, because it sounds like Harry Potter for some reason. Switch and flip the fraction. Okay, and that's what we need to do when we are trying to find the perpendicular slope. Okay, so there's the difference. Parallel is the same, perpendicular is switched and flipped. So here's some slope examples. Okay, so if the slope is 3/4, the perpendicular would be negative 4/3, because I changed the sign and I flipped the fraction. Okay, same thing here. If it's 2, that's the same as 2/1. So switch the sign to positive, from positive to negative, and then flip it over to be 1/2. Okay, so negative, change to positive, 8/7. And then 1 change to negative 1/1, which is still just -1. Okay, and then this one we should know based on all the slope stuff, but if it's 0, the opposite of 0 should be undefined, which is something we've done quite a bit with. Okay, so just a couple quick examples, and then we'll go to the back side of this. So here's a good example. So if you want to write down AB and CD, okay, so we'll do two quick examples. So the first one here, I've got a slope for AB, so XY and XY. I want to find the slope for AB. And I'm going to see if they're parallel or perpendicular, or maybe neither. Okay, so I've got 6 minus 3 over 2 minus -2, which becomes plus. So that's 3/4. All right. So the second one, CD, I've got 3 minus 0 on top, 3 minus negative 1 on bottom, which becomes plus, so 3 over 4. So in that case, we can say those are parallel. Or if you want the symbol for parallel is that. So we can go back up to our thing up here. Parallel is the symbol. It's kind of like just two lines right next to each other. Perpendicular, if you want a symbol for that, it's kind of like an upside down T. Okay, so if you want those symbols, there they are. Okay, so there's our first example, and then let's look at the second one. So again, for AB, I've got y minus y is 4 minus 2, 5 minus 0 on bottom, so 2 over 5. CD, I've got y minus y, so 3 minus 8 over 3 minus 1. So that's negative 5 on top, 2 on bottom. Well, look what happened. They changed signs, okay? They changed signs, and they flipped over, okay? So that is perpendicular, okay? Or the symbol for that is the upside down T, okay? So let's go to the back side here. These are a little easier, okay? So go ahead and just look at these examples. You don't necessarily have to write them down, but if you have these equations, you got to be able to figure out, are these parallel or perpendicular? Or maybe neither. So in this case, I've got y equals mx plus b for 9, y equals mx plus b for the other equation. So 7 is my slope, 7 is my slope. So those are parallel, or there. Same thing here, number 10. Look at the slope. Y equals mx plus b. It's switched signs and it flipped. So that is perpendicular. Okay. Now look at number 11. Good example. It switched signs, but did it flip? In this case, no. So sometimes it's neither. And that would be a good example of that. Okay. And then sometimes you have to get y by itself to figure out what it is. Okay. But we'll save that for later. All right, so let's go to the next part, which is writing equations based on what the situation gives us. Okay, so this goes back to our last chapter where we have to find equations. So what are we doing? Given the linear equation and a certain point, you can create another equation that passes through this point and is parallel or perpendicular to the line. So similar to what we did in the last chapter, we're going to take the slope and point slope form and go from there. Okay, so keep in mind the following things. Parallel lines have the same slope. Okay, perpendicular lines have opposite sign. Okay, opposite reciprocal. Opposite reciprocal, which means the fraction flips over. Okay, so for this first one, first of all, we need to make sure we remember the point slope form. Okay, so remember point slope form looks like this: y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And then we also need to remember slope-intercept. So slope-intercept is y equals mx plus b. Okay, so we've got these two equations. So you need to make sure those are written down somewhere. And we're going to use both of those. So look at the first example here. Okay, I've got, write the equation of the line that passes through the point -2, 7, and is parallel, so it has the same slope as y equals -4 x plus 1. So in this case, look at the slope. M equals -4. My new equation should have the same slope because we want parallel. Okay, if it said perpendicular, I would need to change that slope. But in this case, I can go ahead and find the equation. So y minus the y value, so 7, equals -4 for the slope, x minus -2, which becomes +2. And then it's the exact same thing we were doing in the last chapter. So y minus 7, -4 times x, -4 times 2 is -8. And then get y by itself. And so we get y equals -4x minus 1. And there we are. Okay. Good example there. Let's do a perpendicular example, and then I'll leave one for you to do, or a couple for you to do for homework. Okay, so if you want to write that one down, that's good. And then number 3, same thing. I've got y1 and y2. Here's my y equals mx plus b. So the m is 2, so perpendicular means I need to flip and switch. So -1/2 is going to be my new slope. Okay, so perpendicular, flip it over, change the sign, and do the exact same thing. Y minus the y value, which is 3, equals -1/2, x minus the x value of 4. And now we need to go ahead and finish it. So y minus y minus 3, -1/2 times x. Negative times negative is positive. And then 1/2 times 4, you can kind of make that 4/1. So negative times negative is positive, 4/2. So that's y minus 3 equals -1/2x plus 2. And now I just get y by itself by adding 3. Y equals -1/2x plus 5. And there's my equation. Okay, so it's perpendicular because it has a perpendicular slope, and then I have the slope, or the point here, to plug in. Okay, so on your own, let's go ahead and get a couple examples for you to do at home. So I want you to try this one, number 5. And we'll talk about that one tomorrow, Tuesday. Okay, so all you're doing is finding an equation passing through the point that's parallel to that. So you want the same slope and that point. So again, you need to be using y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Okay, that's the first one. So if you need to pause that to write it down, go ahead and pause it. And then the other problem we'll go over is number 9. Okay, so again, use y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1 with that slope. But again, perpendicular means you take that slope and you flip it over and change the sign. Okay, so write those two down, and we'll talk about those tomorrow. Peace.